Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Sydney, Friday afternoon. Thank God it's Friday. Let's all go out and get intoxicated. But before we do, remember Julian Assange. Over 50 different journalists' awards, and he's locked up in the maximum security Belmarsh prison in England. And he has been there for 3.5 years, and he has been charged with nothing. The American state, the CIA, are trying to deport him to America. The English government is collaborating and not letting him come back to Australia as a free man. He's married with 2 kids under 6. And he's locked up in a maximum security jail where he gets 1 hour's exercise maximum a day in solitary confinement for 3.5 years, and they have not charged him with anything. Julian Assange is a victim of the system of UK injustice. The judge that has locked up Julian Assange on no charge is the wife of an English Tory politician. The only reason Julian Assange is behind bars is for telling the truth about war crimes, about the murder of civilians in Iraq, the murder of civilians in Afghanistan, the corruption of Western military-industrial complex globally. Free Julian Assange now. Bring him home to Queensland. Bring Julian Assange home to Australia. It's time. It's time that the Anthony Albanese federal Labor government stopped hiding behind the so-called system of injustice in the UK and stood up. As the human rights lawyer Jennifer Robinson said on the National Press Club last Wednesday, this crime of locking up Julian needs a political solution, not a legal solution, because the court system will drag it on for years. His physical and mental health is deteriorating by the day. He's had 1 stroke as recently as 6 months ago. Free Julian Assange, the Aussie from Queensland that founded WikiLeaks and exposed the global corrupt war crimes of the war machines of the world. He has won every single journalist award in the world. He did nothing but publish what all the other newspapers who took the WikiLeaks information did, from the UK Guardian to the German daily newspaper to the New York Times and the Washington Post. They all published what Julian Assange put up on the public record. He's an Aussie. Bring him home. Stand up for your fellow Aussies. Craig Foster stood up for the guy that was locked up in Bangkok. Scott Morrison and Anthony Albanese have been campaigning to free the businesswoman, Australian citizen from China. Why can't they stand up for Julian Assange? Born and raised in Queensland, IQ 193. They won't let him free because he exposed the American Air Force, of which the Australian Air Force is a loyal, subservient puppet, I say to that young cadet walking past. We have to free Julian Assange. Contact Anthony Albanese, our Prime Minister's office in Marrickville Road now. Ring him up tell his staff you want him to demand the freedom of Julian Assange. He has been held for no other reason than punishment for telling the world about international war crimes. Free Julian Assange now. He's a political prisoner who's been detained for 3.5 years in solitary confinement in a UK prison that takes us back to the convict era. There's no justice in British justice. British justice is just ass. A-double-S for those who can't spell donkey. Free Julian Assange now. Ring Albo's office. Say, Albo, take action. Bring home our boy, our Queensland boy. He may not be a New South Welshman, but there's a lot of us here in New South Wales that support freeing Julian Assange. Get off your butts, get onto your mobile phones, stop looking at your Instagram photo collection, send a text to Albo's office, Anthony Albanese, Prime Minister of Australia, and to our Foreign Minister. Who's our Foreign Minister? Anyone know? Penny Wong. Send a message to Penny Wong. Free Julian Assange. It'll only take you 10 seconds. You don't have to contact all your Facebook friends unless to tell them to contact Penny Wong, Anthony Albanese, and demand that Julian Assange, a good old Aussie boy who stood up for human rights and press freedom, be released now from the maximum security Belmarsh prison. 12 years in detention, and he has not been charged with any crime. The CIA tried to fit him out with sexual assault charges in Sweden. They had to drop both those charges as totally unfounded. All they're holding him for is nothing. Free Julian Assange now. And while you're at it, text Penny Wong, Foreign Affairs Minister, text everyone you can. Go to the Free Assange website. This guy here will talk to you. That guy over there will. Yes, of course you can take a picture. Spread the word. Put it out on Instagram, Facebook. Get it trending. Don't worry about your sex lives and putting your girlfriend shot up in a low-cut dress. Instead, use Facebook to spread the word. Free Julian Assange. Let the Aussie boy out. He's been detained for over 12 years. He has a wife and 2 kids now, and he's detained in the most serious maximum security prison in the UK. Julian Assange and WikiLeaks published nothing that the US, German, Australian press has not already published. He should be free. He's a whistleblower. He's a truth teller. He fights war criminals. Hands up all those who support war criminals and killing civilians. Any hands in the air? Who loves killing civilians for nothing? Well, that's what the US Air Force did in Afghanistan and Iraq. That's what some of the Australian SAS soldiers did in Afghanistan. Those war criminals should be charged, not the messenger. Free the whistleblower Julian Assange. Get off your Facebook, take a photo of the sign, send that out on Instagram, Facebook, Messenger, all your social media. Go to the Free Assange website, sign the petition that 750,000 people have already signed. demand war crimes charges against the CIA assassination squad, where Assange was hiding out in the Ecuador embassy seeking political asylum. Spread the word by social media. Text Albo and Penny Wong, Prime Minister and Foreign Affairs Minister. Let the English people know we don't agree with them locking up one of ours for no reason at all. We know there's a crisis in England, 3 Prime Ministers in 3 months. That even tops the Australian record. So get on your little Twitter handles. Free Julian Assange. There's a few websites out there. Find one. Sign the petition here that 750,000 Aussies have already signed, and let Julian Assange come home to Queensland to see his parents. Let him out so he can see his 2 kids and his wife. Free Julian Assange. It's going to require a political decision. Tell Albo and Penny Wong to stop hiding behind legal appeals. British justice is pure bulldust. The courts are rigged. They'll drag out the court system till doomsday. Let's all take action on social media. Flood social media with Free Julian Assange. Just forget about your girlfriends and boyfriends for one Friday afternoon. Get off your Facebook for 5 seconds between bus stops and Twitter, Free Julian Assange. Let the Queensland Aussie boy come home. Maximum detention, maximum security jail, 1 hour a day for breathing outside, solitary confinement, 3.5 years next to prisoners who are murderers and rapists. Let him out. They haven't charged him with anything. Free Julian Assange. Go to the websites. Go to the Twitter handle. Free Julian Assange. And free the other whistleblowers while you're at it. Drop the charges against Duncan McBride for whistleblowing to 4 corners on the crimes of SAS soldiers in Afghanistan that led to the Brereton report. Free Julian Assange now. Go on, pull out your mobile phones, get on your Twitter, get on your Facebook, get on your Instagram. Instead of taking selfies, take a selfie of Julian Assange and send it out to all your friends. And tell Albo and Penny Wong, 5 months of a Labor government that pretends to stand up for human rights still detains refugees that have been in detention at Manus and Nauru for over a decade. But free Julian Assange. 12.5 years is 12.5 years too long. Okay, get your mobile phones out, take a photo, send it to all your friends, and get their Twitter handle, Free Julian Assange, and let Albo, and let Penny Wong, and let Peter Dutton, and let the Greens, and let the Teals, and let all the 4 federal politicians know that we want Julian Assange, a true blue Aussie boil who blew the whistle on war crimes. We want him back in Aussie.
lovely to be here, standing up for something that's very, very important. It's called human rights. And it's very important that all citizens stand up for human rights for all other citizens, because if we don't, we can allow people in so-called authority to throw us in jail and throw the key away, and no one will stand up for us. You know, we're in a situation where governments all over the world are becoming more and more autocratic, getting more and more control over everybody, and they don't like debate, they don't like free speech, they just want us to obey. But they have no right to force us to obey, because there's such a thing as a Universal Declaration of Human Rights, whereby authorities can only go so far. They can't make laws and statutes that take away our inalienable rights. And that's what they've done to Julian Assange. It is the most important human rights issue in the world, because if we allow them to do to Julian Assange, to throw him in jail, put him in a dungeon for the rest of his life, kill him, where he'll probably die in custody, we allow them to do that to him for having an opinion and having free speech and reporting crimes of public officials, they'll do it to you, and they'll do it to your children, and they'll do it to your grandchildren. So it's a global issue. Human rights are something that humans all over the world have to stand up for against authoritarian governments when they do the wrong thing. So that's why we're here. We're here to beseech you to stand up for the human rights of every Australian and every person in the world in as much as we can. And we are not going to let Anthony Albanese say, oh, we believe in quiet diplomacy. He has done nothing to improve Assange's circumstances. He's done nothing. And for them to hide behind the lie that there's a judicial process, when we all know he's a political prisoner and there's absolutely no judicial solution. That's why the lawyers have been delaying and putting forward his extradition and stalling it, because they're waiting for the politicians to do the right thing and come up with a settlement of the matter. And we're here to remind every Australian, until Anthony Albanese gets off his derriere, gets off his backside, and stops taking public money for doing his job, actually does his job and stands up for an Australian citizen that must be protected from the tyranny that he's facing at the moment, and the almost certain death he's going to face in a prison in America when he's put in front of a kangaroo court and gets absolutely no justice whatsoever. Human rights are very, very important, and they're inalienable. No politician, no government can remove our human rights. They are inalienable. And if we don't stand up for them for ourselves, we won't have them for ourselves, and we won't have them for our children. So we beseech you, do whatever you can to stand up for Julian Assange's human rights, because they're your human rights. In Australia as well, we have far too many people in prison that haven't been charged or haven't been prosecuted. Free the truth. Free Julian Assange. Free Julian Assange. Free Julian Assange. Free Julian Assange. Only one decision. No extradition. Only one decision. No extradition. Only one decision. No extradition.
guy?
Yeah,
Where is he now?
Belmarsh prison in England.
Oh, in England!
Yes. Have our leaflet.
I thought he was Australian.
He is Australian, but he's in Belmarsh prison in England.
But maybe we are doing the right thing. Well, I want to know what it is. Some people think that it's worth standing here for Julian Assange, and the majority of people, even people who come walk past, take the leaflet. They don't come and stand here. They'll take the leaflet. Probably they agree with, I'm sure they agree with the idea, but they don't see that they need to do anything. It's not vitally important to them. And we think that this is what everyone should do, and if everybody did it, we would have a human rights. Desmond says dissident rights prevent them going to the point where they start calling us all off to compromise.
Shall we do this? Steve?
Yeah, we got 3 petitions.
Welcome to the 153rd week of Julian Assange Sydney Town Hall gatherings. By protecting the identities of whistleblowers, Julian Assange created a viable way for public interest information to be published. Through increasing our knowledge about the world, Julian has made it possible for us to hold government and corporate officials to account for their illegal and unethical activities. For too long, a few extremely powerful individuals have veiled corrupt systems in secrecy. In response, Julian's media organisation, WikiLeaks, has brought about involuntary transparency for governments and corporations, making us all better informed. Through this public-serving transparency, we are in an improved position for bringing about greater levels of democracy. We now need government and corporate officials to be held accountable for their actions. We cannot rely on governments or corporations to hold themselves accountable. Clearly, that's not how the world works. We, the members of the general public, must be the ones to hold governments and corporations accountable. Ultimately, democracy is our responsibility. Human rights are our responsibility. Justice is our responsibility. We must engage with our responsibilities. As human beings, we are all responsible for our democracy. None of us is served by partaking in the luxury of apathy. When we see the governments of the United States, the United Kingdom, Sweden and Australia uniting in their efforts to persecute Julian Assange, we must take responsibility and make sure they don't get away with their crimes. We must all realise that honest journalism serves us well. We must all realise that Julian Assange is completely innocent and that his actions benefit all decent people. We must hold our governments to account, not just for Julian's sake, but for all our sakes. It would be great if all easily accessible media were on our side, but they are not. The corporate media work against us by failing to remind us to act democratically and fight for Julian's freedom. We need our media to encourage us to act responsibly and hold governments and corporations to account. We need our social media to encourage free speech and dissonant voices. Each of us need to be free enough in ourselves to look at information that is relevant to our well-being. Each of us must be free enough in ourselves to form our own opinions. Each of us must be free enough in ourselves to work for democracy. We need to exercise our free will and become morally engaged. The arbitrary imprisonment and psychological torture of Julian Assange are totally undemocratic. All publishers of public interest truth must be protected from governments. If we are serious about our own well-being, we must be engaged in protecting and freeing Julian Assange. It is our responsibility to hold governments and corporations to account, and we must hold each other accountable for not being responsible. If we are serious about democracy, we must work to free Julian Assange. We must be hyper-vigilant. We must use our free will and engage in our own moral reasoning. We must see government and corporate propaganda for what it is. We must triumph over corruption for our humanity. So I ask you all, free Julian Assange. Free Julian Assange. Free Julian Assange. There is only one decision. There is only one decision. Inmate Julian Assange. Thank you.
for years now for doing his job as a journalist. He's had a mini stroke. He's not a well man. He wasn't a well man before he went to prison, and prison has done him no favours. So I'm very concerned about Julian. I could not have imagined 10 years ago that my country would allow an Australian citizen, a Walkley Award-winning journalist, to be held in prison for committing absolutely no crime. He only did the job of a journalist, and he published information that was in the public interest. I'm worried about Julian, but I'm also worried about all of us. Because if we allow this to happen to Julian Assange, he's not going to be the end of it. They're going to come for all of us. While our rights are being whittled away, we seem to just sit and watch, and our government does nothing. Nothing that we can see to help our Walkley Award-winning journalist. The Walkley Award is the highest accolade for journalism in this country. As Australians, we need to stand up for Julian. I've had people, including my father-in-law, say, oh, we mustn't upset the US. What would we do without them? They're there to protect Australia. If we got in trouble, we can rely on the United States. Well, I don't really think that the United States has our back. If we found ourselves in trouble, I don't think we can rely on the United States to be a knight in shining armour for Australia. Look at how they treat their own people. Look at the number of homeless people on the streets. They don't look after their own. Why would we think they're going to look after Australia? So it's time for Australia to put our own citizens, our own people, ahead of a foreign nation who doesn't have our best interest at heart. It's time for Australia to stand up to the United States and demand that an innocent Australian journalist be released from prison and given back to his family. Free inmate, our mate, Julian Assange.
I think it should be free.
Oh, well, they're all going down. They're going down. And they're the ones that they're going to kill each other in Australia. No, that's the root of it.
Hi, so how are you?
So, what's your
Started. Assange.
Because everyone knows this will be why, because the park will be full of shoppers walking past.
We are all Assange.